A large, steep, rogue wave forms out of nowhere and hits Enchanter on the port side, rolling the vessel onto its starboard side. 10 men are left grasping for their life in one of the largest search and rescue areas in the world. Built in 1982 by Haag Boat Designs in Tauranga, New Zealand, Enchanter was a 14.2 meter motor sailor. It had a single-deck superstructure made of fiberglass and marine plywood, and was powered by twin diesel engines that could reach a service speed of 8 knots. After 2 years, Enchanter was modified to be a passenger vessel with a semi-open flybridge added on top of the main saloon. The flybridge served as both an extra control station and viewing platform. In 1993, the ship's stern was extended by 2 meters and became a 16.2 meter commercial fishing vessel. In 2004, Lance Goodhue bought Enchanter and operated as Enchanter Fishing Charters of Manganui in Northland, New Zealand. In 2009, Goodhue converted Enchanter for people to sleep on board so he could do multi-day fishing cruises, and the flybridge was enclosed with glass windows. After the conversion, it could accommodate 8 guests with sleeping quarters in the cabin below, forward of the main saloon, and 2 crew in a cabin behind and below the main saloon. Goodhue had the vessel resurveyed so that it could operate past its previous 12 nautical mile inshore limit and go up to 100 nautical miles with a restricted offshore limit. On Wednesday, the 16th of March 2022, a group of 8 people arrive in Manganui to spend the night on board Enchanter where it's berthed. The group books Enchanter for a 5-day fishing expedition out of Manganui to the remote and rugged Three Kings Islands, 43 nautical miles up the coastline. The group of friends who are avid fishermen from the Waikato region meticulously plan this trip for over a year and pay $16,000 to Goodhue's Fishing Charters, which specializes in big game fishing. The group is aware of a storm on its way, but they choose to go ahead because they can't get a refund. In the morning on the 17th of March, Lance Goodhue, the owner and skipper, gives a safety briefing to the passengers about where to find and how to use different life-saving equipment on board Enchanter. He tells the passengers that all 30 life jackets are stored under the bunks in the forward passenger compartments, but he doesn't show them what they look like or how to put them on. Then he shows them the 2 life rafts fastened to the flybridge's aft deck with a hydrostatic release. At 0830, Enchanter departs Manganui with 10 men on board, Goodhue the skipper, a deckhand, and the 8 passengers. On their way to the Three Kings Islands, they tow fishing lures and anchor at Northwest Bay on Great Island for the night. The weather is fine with light winds. The next day, they go to Middlesex Bank to fish, and then return to Northwest Bay on Great Island for the night. The group is scheduled for a day of fishing at King Bank, followed by an overnight stay at Little Bear Bay on Great Island. Even though the weather is fine with light wind, Goodhue chooses Little Bear Bay on the southwest side of Great Island to shelter from the predicted northeast weather that's set to pass over the area during the night. By 0600 on the 20th of March, even though the weather has passed across the area as predicted, it's still raining and bringing strong northeasterly winds. The group stays at anchorage at Little Bear Bay just to be safe. They fish in the bay and have breakfast. At 10:30, as the weather clears up, Enchanter leaves Little Bear Bay and sails to Prince's Islands about 5 nautical miles southwest. They fish until 13:30 on the lee or the sheltered side of Prince's Islands, until the seas have calmed down enough for them to sail to the North Cape. They intend to anchor in the lee of Muramoto Island for the night. Enchanter sets out on the 7-hour journey over waves that are 2 to 3 meters high and winds blowing from the northeast at 20 knots. By 1700, the sea conditions have subsided and the weather is clear enough for the skipper to let the passengers open the main saloon's side windows and tow their fishing lures. At 1940, Goodhue uses the radio to call Far North Radio to register their plan to spend the night anchored at Muramoto Island, which is at the southeast tip of North Cape, the northernmost point of New Zealand's North Island. Goodhue tells Far North Radio that he'll call again in an hour once Enchanter has anchored. On board Enchanter, 6 of the passengers in the saloon relax and drink a beer while they wait for dinner. Another passenger is asleep in the forward cabin, and the 8th passenger is sitting on the aft deck watching the fishing rods. The deckhand is in the galley cooking the evening meal, and Goodhue is on the flybridge navigating the vessel. As Enchanter draws near North Cape, northeast of Muramoto Island, Goodhue makes a course adjustment of about 10 degrees in a southerly direction much earlier than their charted waypoint. The early course shift causes Enchanter to turn towards shallow water that the skipper isn't aware of. Their new course takes them through an area where 2 sets of waves meet. Deep water waves heading towards shore in a westerly direction, and now the northeasterly swell from the earlier storm. The waves heading towards the shore peak as they enter the shallower water off Muramoto Island. The collision of the 2 sets of waves is called interference. The waves either cancel each other out, or the force of the 2 waves combine to form a significantly larger wave. At 1950, as twilight sets in, Enchanter is cruising along the 10-meter depth contour off Muramoto Island in the North Cape. A large, steep rogue wave sporadically forms and hits Enchanter on the port side, rolling the ship to starboard. Enchanter's superstructure hits the water violently and shatters the windows. 7 passengers and the deckhand are tossed from the vessel and thrown into the water. The flybridge and main saloon are ripped from the hull as it rolls and capsizes. Water pours through the hatch, flooding the vessel and trapping the 8th passenger resting in the forward cabin. The flybridge floats upside down alongside the overturned hull. The skipper, Goodhue, is trapped under the inverted flybridge but manages to escape and swim out to the surface. Because everything happens so fast, the passengers don't have time to find or put on their life jackets. The 2 life rafts are still fastened to the flybridge. If a vessel sinks below roughly 2 to 4 meters, the life rafts would automatically inflate. But they haven't descended far enough below the waterline to activate, and they're secured to the top of the flybridge, which is underwater, so the crew don't see them. As night sets in, the deckhand manages to climb the inverted hull and count the survivors in the water. The deckhand, the captain, and 7 passengers are accounted for. 2 passengers join the deckhand on the inverted hull. The skipper and 1 passenger climb on top of the nearby inverted flybridge. 4 passengers are still in the water. Enchanter has 4 lifebuoys located on either side of the flybridge and another 2 on top of the now inverted flybridge roof. But the survivors only find 1. 1 of the 4 passengers manages to grab the lifebuoy and put it over his head and under his armpits, while 3 of his companions grab onto floating debris. A few minutes later, the deckhand sees that 1 of the 4 passengers is floating face down in the water. The deckhand dives into the water and swims towards the unconscious passenger. He drags him to the upside-down flybridge. On the flybridge, Goodhue and another passenger try to resuscitate the victim, but he doesn't respond. The skipper ties a rope around the body and secures it to the flybridge. This all happens quite quickly, and the life rafts don't deploy automatically, but life rafts have got a rope called a painter that you can pull to deploy the life raft manually. I'm just guessing here, but I imagine the crew don't want to swim under the vessel. It's dark, and with the waves, I'm sure it's too dangerous, and so they probably don't know if the life rafts are still there or if they can reach them. Enchanter's emergency position indicating radio beacon, or EPIRB, is mounted under the flybridge floor and fastened to a float-free bracket on the deck, and it floats up next to the skipper. The EPIRB hasn't automatically activated, so they manually turn it on and tie it to the inverted flybridge. Anywhere in the world, satellites can pick up the signal from an EPIRB, which emits a distress signal with a unique identification code that can be used to reference details about the vessel. This includes the vessel's name, type of survival gear on board, and an emergency contact person on land. Now, all they can do is wait. At 2017, the New Zealand Rescue Coordination Centre receives the first signal alert from Enchanter's EPIRB, indicating a distress off North Cape. They call the shore base and learn during the call that Enchanter is operating close to the North Cape. 3 minutes later, the Rescue Coordination Center receives the first complete transmission from the EPIRB, which includes GPS coordinates. At 20:30, the Rescue Coordination Center directs the Marine Operations Center to issue Mayday relays on VHF Channel 16, requesting all vessels in the vicinity to aid in the response, but there aren't any vessels in the immediate area. The Rescue Coordination Center also notifies the Auckland-based New Zealand Coast Guard duty officer, who designates the northmost unit Coast Guard Puhora to respond. In New Zealand, the Coast Guard is a charity that depends only on volunteers. Donations, membership fees, and grants account for about 70% of the Coast Guard's operating revenue. Although the organization is regarded as the main search and rescue service in New Zealand, both their volunteer crew training and their crafts are primarily intended for inshore incidents and aren't suitable for major, difficult, or lengthy search and recovery operations. The majority of their call-outs are responding to recreational boat events, supplying fuel to boaters who've run out, or towing broken down boats to safety. The Rescue Coordination Center also alerts the Northland Emergency Services Trust helicopters based in Whangarei. These helicopters are civilian-operated medical service helicopters that can be used for search and recovery operations when there are no medical emergencies. Northland Emergency gives a departure time of 20 to 30 minutes, which is a normal response time. At 21:09, after doing a risk assessment, the Coast Guard notifies the Rescue Coordination Center that they won't be able to respond at night because of the limitations of their vessel and the severity of the weather forecast, and the air ambulance is having its own issues. At 21:10, Northland Emergency Air Ambulance tells the rescue center that there'll be a delay since the helicopter is set up for medical operations and not search and recovery. They have to assemble the right chopper crew and attach a winch to adapt the helicopter for a search and rescue operation. Finding and winching individuals from the water into a helicopter in the dark in bad weather is a dangerous task that needs a comprehensive plan. To help with the response, Northland Emergency suggests that the rescue center assign another civilian-operated medical care helicopter from the Auckland Rescue Helicopter Trust. The rescue center contacts Auckland nearly an hour after getting the first EPIRB notification. At 22:05, the Northland Emergency Helicopter departs from Whangarei, heading towards Kataia Hospital, the most northerly point where they maintain a fuel trailer. After a 45-minute journey, the Northland Emergency Helicopter arrives at Kataia Hospital and refuels from the trailer to maximize their time on scene at North Cape. Meanwhile, at the Ardmore Aerodrome in Auckland, a rescue helicopter leaves about an hour after receiving the order. The Auckland rescue helicopter heads towards North Shore Aerodrome to pick up a more seasoned winch operator and then flies to Kataia with a stopover at Dargaville to refuel. At 23:13, the Northland Emergency Helicopter departs Kataia and heads to the position coordinates transmitted by Enchanter's EPIRB. Just before midnight, it reaches the accident site and spots two lights in the water. The first is a water-based strobe light that isn't attached to anything. The second light is from Enchanter's EPIRB attached to the flybridge with the skipper, deckhand, and a passenger clinging on. In the light from the helicopter, the skipper, the deckhand, and the passenger notice that the body they tied onto the structure has drifted away. The helicopter crew evaluate the situation and lower a rescue swimmer to the water. The rescue swimmer and the three survivors are then winched on board one at a time. At 00:13, going into the 21st of March, the Northland Emergency Helicopter reaches full capacity and leaves the accident site. They fly the three survivors to Te Hapua, where the New Zealand police have established a forward command post. Te Hapua is the closest location to the search by road, and an ambulance is already waiting. During the flight, the helicopter crew learn from the survivors that two people are last seen sitting on the inverted hull. 3 are in the water, another likely dead and in the water, and 1 is probably stuck in the inverted hull. The clock is ticking. The longer they're in the water, the higher the risk of hypothermia setting in. Some have sustained injuries when the vessel capsized, and a few have pre-existing medical conditions. After a long flight, the Auckland rescue helicopter arrives at Kataia Hospital to refuel before continuing to the search site. At Te Hapua, the Northland emergency helicopter transfers the survivors to the ambulance and returns to the accident site to continue the search. One of the passengers uses the light from his mobile phone to draw their attention. In the water, they've tried to make an emergency call, but that's not successful because the area has weak cell coverage. The Northland helicopter sees the light and flies towards it. They see the inverted hull carrying the 2 passengers and 3 passengers drifting half a nautical mile away in the current. At 0108, after retrieving the 2 passengers, the crew heads straight to Kataia Hospital because the chopper is running low on fuel. On their way to Kataia Hospital, they pass the Auckland rescue helicopter in flight and exchange information. The Northland helicopter lands at Kataia Hospital and transfers the 2 passengers to the medical staff. The helicopter then tries to refuel at the fuel trailer, but there's not enough fuel to make a trip back to Enchanter's location. The helicopter stays at Kataia Hospital while the rescue center looks for fuel. The far north has a limited supply of fuel for helicopters because the quality deteriorates over time, which makes it difficult to store large quantities. Northland Emergency only keeps 1,200 litres of fuel in the trailer at Kataia Hospital. It's the furthest permanent supply of A1 jet fuel available to aircraft in the region. 1,200 litres is enough for routine tasks like ambulance work, but search and rescue operations are far from normal. The Enchanter search and rescue mission starts as a 1 helicopter operation but ends up with multiple aircraft and multiple flights. A Royal New Zealand Air Force P-3 Orion aircraft is sent by the rescue centre to help with the search. Even though the aircraft doesn't have the ability to maneuver like a helicopter, it's quite effective for conducting searches. The P-3 is a perfect communications platform because it can send information to the rescue centre and instruct other assets to search different areas for debris. The aircraft has thermal imaging that can identify large items in the water like ships, but it isn't good at identifying people. At 0130, the Orion P-3 aircraft and Auckland rescue helicopter arrive on site at about the same time and they begin the search for the 5 missing people. But rain squalls and clouds block the P-3's view. Flying a large aircraft at low altitude below the clouds at night means it has to stay further offshore than the actual scene to maintain a safe distance from land. So the rescue center reassigns the P-3 as the on-scene coordinator, circling at higher altitude. The helicopter searches at a lower level in the dark for about an hour and 20 minutes before it runs low on fuel and lands at the Te Hapua forward command post. With no fuel available for the helicopters to use, the search operation loses its air assets. Several vessels respond to the Mayday relay calls. At 0400, the Pacific Invader, one of Goodhue's fishing charter vessels, arrives at the search area. The Florence Nightingale, a commercial fishing vessel coming from the Three Kings Islands, follows soon after. At 0511, a fuel tanker with aviation fuel arrives at the hospital. The Northland emergency helicopter is refueled, but the crew have gone beyond their operating hours and can't return to the search. The fuel tanker continues north to refuel the Auckland rescue helicopter, which is waiting at Te Hapua. At 0612, the Katrina, another commercial fishing vessel, joins the search party. The P-3 circling overhead directs all 3 vessels to objects of interest and coordinates a search grid. At 0710, just after daylight, one of the surface search vessels finds and recovers the lifeless body of the passenger with the lifebuoy. The lifebuoy is in poor condition and doesn't have retroreflective tape. Retroreflective tape is used on objects that need high visibility at night because it reflects light back in a 180-degree direction, unlike a mirror which bounces light away in the equal but opposite direction. During a search and rescue operation, retroreflective tape shines like a beacon to a rescue pilot wearing night vision goggles. At 0733, the Auckland rescue chopper departs for the search area after 4.5 hours without helicopter coverage at the accident location. The P-3 is running low on fuel, so the Auckland rescue helicopter takes over as on-scene coordinator. Over the next 40 minutes, the bodies of 2 more passengers are recovered. leaving 2 people still missing. At 0907, the first Auckland rescue helicopter is relieved by a second Auckland rescue helicopter that arrives at the forward command post. At 11:10, the inshore patrol vessel, Her Majesty's New Zealand ship Taupo, arrives on the scene and the rescue centre assigns Taupo as the on-scene coordinator. Taupo is a military vessel which has a different definition for the term on-scene coordinator, and so they apply the role of on-scene command and remove the rescue centre from command of the search. There's confusion because of the lack of joint training between the Navy and the rescue centre. Royal New Zealand Navy personnel are trained in basic search and rescue techniques, but not in rescue coordination. Over the following hours, other parties join the search, including Coast Guard vessel Huhora, 2 other commercial helicopters from Kerry Kerry, and another P-3 aircraft. At 13:19, the body of a 4th passenger is found and recovered, leaving 1 passenger still missing. At 15:27, the rescue centre realizes that air assets aren't following their assigned search patterns. Taupo has created their own drift modelling calculations and redirected all assets to a new search area. After some discussion with Taupo, the rescue centre takes back control of the search. The rescuers realize that the last missing passenger may still be trapped inside the hull of Enchanter. So the rescue centre asks the New Zealand Police dive squad from Wellington to assist in the search. Taupo marks the hull by attaching a rope with a white buoy, and the P-3 records the GPS coordinates, then leaves the scene. At 19:53, the dive squad arrives at the staging area and prepares to dive the following day. The following morning, the divers can't find the inverted hull, and so a helicopter is sent to search for it. Just after midday, the helicopter spots the hull and they direct the New Zealand Police dive squad vessel to the location. 4 hours later, the body of the last missing passenger is recovered from the hull, which brings the search and rescue operation to an end. 3 passengers, the skipper and the deckhand, were rescued from the water, but 5 friends died. New Zealand has one of the largest search and rescue regions in the world, and the majority of the rescuers are volunteers. In April 2023, after 3 inquiries, Maritime New Zealand formally charged Goodhue with the 5 deaths. In July 2024, after hearing all testimonies, the judge acquitted Goodhue of the charges. I've recently teamed up with Low Wave Records to record the music in this video. If you'd like to listen on Spotify, I'll leave a link below.